Hi and welcome to week 3 of Run Towards It. I'm here with Jordan, and the last couple of weeks we've been talking about the fear of failure. We've been talking about distractions, and the premise of this series are the very things that we might be avoiding, the keys to our breakthrough, and that's what we kind of want to talk about. I hope it's been helpful and useful. Today we want to talk about being overwhelmed.
Yeah, because we're sort of trying to focus our attention on the sort of main reasons people give up partway through or don't even start on doing something that needs to be done, right? And overwhelm is like a technical term, like a psychological term, and it's physiological, so it's sort of got physical feelings that go with it, and it results in like that fight, flight, or freeze type response to a challenge. And the classic is road rage. Something oftentimes, obviously big time road rage, the stuff that makes the news is, it's quite different. But if someone cuts you off in traffic, they've inconvenienced you by 2 or 3 seconds, but your response is sort of triggered. You feel like, you maybe feel nauseous or whatever, even for a short time, right? But that response is totally disproportionate. Right? It's because there's somehow the whole idea of being inconvenienced or deterred or interfered with is a much bigger thing for humans. So your reaction's based on this whole another dynamic. So I think it's probably a good conversation to have a chat.
I was just going to say the same thing. We're obviously on the same page. When was the last time you had a disproportionate response to something that was maybe seemingly minor in your world, but the default setting all of a sudden was like, bah.
And the trick is this, so it's fight, flight, we see those, or freeze, right? So sometimes I'm like, I've got to do this thing, I've got to do this big job, I've got to respond to that email, and you're like, I've got to get around to sending that email back to Jake, and then you go, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to set aside a whole hour, get this job done. Have you ever done this? I'm going to set aside a whole hour to get this job done, and then you sit down and it's a 30-second job. Well, sometimes 2-minute job or whatever, but you've made it up bigger in your mind, and that's this, again, overwhelm. So sometimes it's like, where did you go, or where did you just not do anything? You just...
The freezing one's an interesting one, because I had a moment around conference time, if it's shout time,
it's busy.
Talking to a lot of people all day, every day, and I got to, I think, the end of the second day, and it was about 5 p.m. and I was sort of just about to get ready to go back out at night again, and I think my wife had asked me a question, and I was like, and I almost couldn't talk, which for me, if you know me, is quite rare.
Well, these people have seen you talking.
It's quite rare, but it was just the sense of I don't think I have another word. That freezing was quite real. Like my brain was just so scattered. Quite a freaky thing, actually, but anyway, that's for free. But to talk about, so why is this sense of, what's some ways that we can help?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember about that trigger that creates this flood of emotion or physical sensations as well that make us feel overwhelmed and interrupt our ability to act is it sort of seems like it's triggered by the challenge is too big and my resources are too small. But the research is really clear. It's not triggered by the challenge being too big and the resources being too small. It's actually triggered by the way you perceive the challenge and the way you perceive your resources.
Okay. So perception's a big key here.
It's really driven by your own perceptions. Like, we've all got friends who are way more confident than they should be.
So just really quickly explain what you mean by perception in case the word, sometimes you struggle with the word.
So
when we perceive something, what are we doing?
So if you think you can tackle that guy, you'll run out there and tackle them. Doesn't matter whether you're 60 kilos or 110 kilos, right?
Because we've seen people do it.
And you see quality sports people, if you're watching professionals, once they start to feel, maybe we can't do it, then they start not being able to do something that they were able to do a minute ago. Like 1 minute ago, they caught the ball, but now they're like, we might lose the game. And that shift in framing perception of the situation actually changes their trigger response, and now they're getting overwhelmed. So the reason that often sports people are dropping the ball, doing something clumsy, is because of this emotional response, which impacts your fine motor skills, right?
And nothing has changed physiology. They're still the same person, the same
the
environment,
field's the same
everything, which is
size,
crazy.
everyone's the same weight, but there's just that shift in thinking and they lose it, right? And I think that happens to us every day in the big challenges of life, the real challenges of life, which aren't sport, like parenting, our key relationships in the workplace, in our journey with God. What's God calling us to? Oftentimes we're freezing up in the moment when we actually need to act, and it's because of the sense of overwhelm. Yeah.
What about, so you touched on freezing up. Do we then, we haven't really touched on this, but do we lack confidence when something might have triggered something and then now we go, I'm never, public speaking for a lot of people is a terrifying thing.
Yeah.
I can remember, man, this girl, when I did my degree, she basically fainted and everyone was feeling for her.
Yeah.
But that thought of just having to do that again was so overwhelming for her, and physiologically, like I say, she just shut down. So is it the fact that we lose our confidence and we go back to that place? I know there's a lot of.
I think it goes back to something you said in the previous one. That, like David, he ran into the battle with Goliath, but this wasn't his first rodeo.
It didn't happen in the moment.
Yeah, so David talks about the lion and the bear, this developmental process. So sometimes it's about just being the person who takes on the small challenges, takes on the difficult, those little things. That's so when a big thing comes, you've got this rhythm inside you. If you think about the David and Saul thing, it really opens up the perception thing. So David's got this view of God that's big, and he's got a sling. Saul's got a view of God that's small. David's like a 15-year-old. Saul is listed in the Bible, is recorded as the tallest person in the whole country. Right? They said he was a head taller than everybody else. So he's the biggest dude. And because this is an ancient story, so it's nothing like our world now, but there was only 2 swords in the whole Israelites family, which is it's an interesting little picture in the Bible because I know
everyone's got a sword.
Yeah, the disciples had 2 swords at one point as well. What does this mean? But anyway, we'll leave that for another day.
They often fought them off with the dried grass. Bad language. Yeah,
totally. So this battle, like David's got a sling, other people have got whatever farm implements. Saul's the tallest person and he's got a sword, but his view of himself is such that he won't engage in the battle. Right, his perception of himself, his perception of the challenge, but mainly his perception of God, like his viewing reality wrong. Right, so David's like, hey, God's gonna break through on my behalf. Saul's like, well, I don't think I can do it. Like it's two totally different worlds they're living in.
Right.
And I think that's sometimes we're trying to change. Oh, if I had as much money as them, if I had the education as them, but the reality is no. If I had a better understanding of who God is and what God wants to do in me, that's going to shift my perception so I'm not so subject to overwhelm.
I feel there's a question coming.
Yeah, you got a question?
Well, yes, I do. I might have to paraphrase the question.
Paraphrasing is good.
But when was a time maybe in your eGroups you could discuss that you knew that you were the one to step out, but you didn't because you felt like either your confidence was rocked or you didn't feel like you had the weapons that are required for that thing. But deep down, you know that you could have done it. Because I think, and can I give you a little story? Can I be a bit vulnerable for a second?
Yeah.
When I've been a pastor now for my 17th year. So when I was asked about what we would call full-time ministry, being paid vocationally to do what I do, it was the 7th time someone asked me about it.
Yeah.
Across multiple church movements and all that. The 7th time. And every time my response was always like, I feel like I'm the business guy. I feel like I'm the one to provide resource. Because really, I knew that if I stepped into what if I sucked at it?
Yeah.
Like really, that was a lot of the issue was actually my own fear and my own pride and whatever. And it took 7 times of someone. And eventually when I did hear from God at the 7th time, it was that awe of God, the fear, that reverential fear of, Jake, what are you doing? Yeah. And I had to get honest, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, I had to get honest with God to go, actually, I'm potentially holding back,
I'm scared of them.
Because I'm scared.
Yeah.
But then realizing all these years back, who could have benefited from my step of obedience as well?
Yeah.
So I just think it's a really big issue that we all face.
Yeah. I think that tells the story. I think it's a really helpful picture of, because, of are we free to act, or are we holding back because of our small view of God that leaves us vulnerable? So.
And that perception about the perception and reality thing, I think John Bevere came many years ago and talked about, and again, I'm paraphrasing, he says there's a view that you have of yourself, there's a view that others have of you, and there's a view that God has of you.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so helpful to frame it like, I might think something about myself, and that's not always healthy. What you talk about yourself is important. There might be a view that others have of me, which I can't really change, right?
No.
Like, that is what it is. I can't get too lost in that. But it really is important to think about how God views me. And,
and to realize that it's different than your own view.
Yeah.
And that God's view is more accurate.
Yeah. It's a great thing to discuss in your eGroup. Man, I want to say God does love you. He does care for you. He thinks about you all the time. And if you're feeling like a little bit vulnerable, to feel like you've lost some confidence, I pray that as you discuss that in your eGroups, that again, that sense of community around you, that sense of what God is doing in your life is really significant. So keep pressing into Him and keep fighting, to live the life that God's called you to live in community with one another. Really important that you do that. Thanks, Jordan. Been a great episode today in our Run Towards It series. Let's not avoid the thing that God might have called us to do, because there might be breakthrough on the other side of that. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.